Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kidlit Social. I'm Laura Backus, publisher of Children's Book Insider, the Children's Writing Monthly, currently about to start celebrating our 32nd year in business, which I'm really proud of. I think we have published continuously every month the newsletter for almost 32 years in May. That's pretty cool. And of course, we have lots of other parts of our business now that we didn't have 32 years ago. So welcome. If you are brand new to us and you want to get on our mailing list so you know about our upcoming Kidlit Social guests, as well as everything else cool that we do, please go to writeforkids.org/ultimate-cheat sheet. You will get on our list and you will also get a free ebook called The Ultimate Children's Writing Cheat Sheet, where we have compiled our best beginner advice. This slide says 31 years of children's writing, and we're going to have to turn that to 32 pretty soon. Great if you're just getting started writing for kids. It gives you kind of all the nuts and bolts, as well as some really great books to start reading. And that is your gift from us. So celebrate. We have a lot of great celebrates this week. So I needed 3 slides to list all the celebrates. So first of all, Dana Alt was featured in an interview in the Live Full Work Fun podcast with Gayla Shrivner on January 12th, where she discusses her publishing journey, which is awesome. So go check that out. Great interview. And it looks like a really cool podcast. I am a big fan of podcasts, and this is one I have not listened to before. So this is pretty cool to discover this. So go check that out. Congratulations, Dana. Mary Louise Sanchez writes, at the January 4th Kidlit Social, I learned about R&R, revise and resubmit. I took this to heart and resubmitted my revised middle grade historical fiction story, Cutting the Strings, to Lee & Low Books, who published my debut novel, The Wind Called My Name, in 2018. So good for you, Mary. Louise, great for getting that revision out there, and keep us posted. Hopefully we'll get another celebrate from you soon about a contract with Lee & Low. And Jean Dagnew announces the release of her latest book, Ellis Island and Immigration for Kids, and Ellis Island and Immigration for Kids, with Chicago Review Press. So congrats, Jean. Jean, for those of you who are subscribers, know that she is our genre spotlight contributor and writes some terrific articles for us several times a year. So congrats, Jean. That's awesome. And Kelly Lima writes, just wanted to share with you and the rest of the world that my Hello Summer book is out. This is my 3rd one since December 27th. Wow. And the 1st and 2nd ones were workbooks with American Sign Language support. So that is great, Kelly. And this looks like a really fun activity book for kids. So I hope that does well for you. Congratulations on that. So send us your good news. Email us at mail@writeforkids.org and put celebrate in the subject line. And I will feature you on a future Kidlit Social. And no celebration is too small. We want to help celebrate every part of your journey with you. So I need more for next time. I want to hear from you. So here's a cool link of interest that was sent to us by our friend Violet LeMay, very talented author, illustrator. She says Nepris is a way for writers and illustrators to lead virtual classroom visits in the Kansas City area. And Violet herself has used this to beam into classrooms in the Kansas City area from all over the world. And she says it's been a great experience and she has loved working with Nepris. The visual, the little slide up at the top here, is a picture she showed me of her dashboard. So once you open an account, which is free, you get this cool dashboard where you can look up all this information. And Nepris connects educators and learners with a network of industry professionals. And what's cool is teachers load up there, we're looking for someone to do a virtual visit in our classroom about this topic. They do a lot of STEAM and STEM type topics as well. And if you're an author whose work ties in with that, you can contact them. You can do the classroom visit. Very cool. So here's a direct link. It's nepris, nepris.com. And go check that out. And thank you, Violet, for letting us know about that. All right, we're going to get to my great guest. So Lesléa Newman has a huge biography of tremendous accomplishments, which would take me the entire time to go through. So I'm just going to give you a little snippet here. She's the author of 75 books for adults and child readers of all ages, including A Letter to Harvey Milk, October Morning, A Song for Matthew Shepard, The Boy Who Cried Fabulous, Quetzal, The Cat Who Composed, one of my favorites, and Heather Has Two Mommies. She has received many literary awards, including 2 National Jewish Book Awards, the Sidney Taylor Body of Work Award, the Highlights for Children Fiction Award, and here are 2 that I find particularly interesting. The Cat Writers Association Muse Medallion and the Dog Writers Association of America's Maxwell Medallion. I had no idea they gave awards like that. That is the coolest awards I think I have announced on the Kidlit Social. 9 of her books have been Lambda Literary Award finalists. So Ms. Newman wrote Heather Has Two Mommies, the first children's book to portray lesbian families in a positive way, and has followed up this pioneering work with several more children's books on lesbian and gay families. And her books deal with lesbian identity, Jewish identity, the intersection and collision between the two. We're going to talk about a lot of those things tonight. And her award-winning short story, A Letter to Harvey Milk, has been made into a film and adapted to the stage. So I would love to welcome my guest, Lesléa Newman, tonight on the social. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you great. We can hear
Excellent.
you great. So, you know, I was doing your intro, and as I mentioned, you have so many credits in your biography that, you know, I had to just take a little slice. But I just love the Dog Writers Association and the Cat Writers Association awards that you have received. And like I said, I have never heard of that. And I just think that's so cool. I know you feature animals in your stories quite often. So you're a big animal lover, and I guess they give awards for great books that feature animals. I did not know. So congrats. So I wanted to start out by talking a little bit about Heather Has Two Mommies. It has appeared on banned book lists consistently for the last 33 years. It was originally published in 1989. Is that correct?
December of 1989 by a very small press, which no longer exists. Heather was the only book they ever did. It was a desktop publishing, if people remember those from way back when. And it was a friend and I co-published the book together because I couldn't find traditional press to do it. So we just decided to do it ourselves. Mm-hmm. And the rest is herstory.
And then Allison Publications picked it up. Like about 6 months later, and now I believe I saw Candlewick has the newest edition out.
Here we go.
Yes,
Candlewick.
There it is. There it is.
The newest version next to the original version.
That's the original. Yeah, that's great. So I watched an interview with you that you did not that long ago, and you said that the reaction to this book being banned, being horrible things were done to this book, ultimately inspired you to become an activist. And now today in the news, every time we open up the news right now, book banning in schools and school libraries, you know, that's never gone away, but it is very front and center again right now in a lot of areas of the country, especially books on racism and that have to do with sexual identity. How does this feel to someone like yourself who has been pushing for inclusiveness and tolerance and acceptance for so long? Do you feel like we've made any progress at this point?
I definitely feel that we have made progress. How it feels very frustrating. It makes me sad for the kids. I mean, the children are really the ones who lose out because they don't get to see themselves and their families represented.
Sure.
And even more than that, they get this message that there's something wrong with me or my
Mhm.
family because kids see what's going on all around them in their own communities, that you can't hide that from kids. So what has two things I think have changed. First of all, the way the books are being attacked is different now. It used to be pretty much an irate parent would call the principal or the librarian and they'd fill out a form. But now it has a lot more to do with local politics and school boards and
Mhm.
people getting elected and really trying from the inside to ban, just an incredible number of books.
Mhm.
So, but the positive side is one thing that has changed is that people are really fighting back in a new way. I feel like people, have had it. Not all people, of course, but many people. And, I've just heard of things like one community, I think it was in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, they decided that they would just put up a bunch of free libraries in their community and just load them with LGBTQ picture books. Because
Right.
Heather was the one that was really, being attacked the most, and other books about diversity. So, in any situation like this, you see the good and bad, or good and not so good of human nature, right? And people really rallying to the cause because they just feel this is just so wrong, which, of course, is what I believe as well.
Mhm. Mhm. And what would you say to authors who are currently writing books that might be deemed controversial by certain groups, and these authors are worried about their future books being banned? How can they stay strong and true to their vision in the face of these threats?
Well, first of all, I just want to encourage everybody to keep writing. Tell your story. We need your stories. We need inclusive stories all across the board.
Mhm.
In terms of staying strong, well, it's tough. It's important if you're a tough cookie like I am, that really helps. But what I think what's really important is to have a group of supportive people around you, whether it's includes your family. It's always good to marry well, I have to say. And I congratulations, by the way, on 32 years of your organization. I know how long that is because that's how long I've been married. So I thought 32 years, yeah, that's a long time.
Mhm.
So surround yourself not only with, people who love you, whether or not you're a writer, but other writers. It's really important to be an active literary citizen so that you can
Mhm.
support other writers who maybe are being attacked. And if that happens to you, there are other people around who know all about you, all about your work, what your intention is, and they will be there for you. I mean, I'm in many writing communities, and I have to say the children's book community is the most supportive community that I have ever been involved with. I never have felt 1 ounce of competitiveness from anybody. And just to be frank, I have felt that in the adult world, but
Mm.
I never find that, maybe because, we're the milk and cookies genre, but, we're nice, right? We like to
Yes.
comfort each other, take care of each other, we're nurturing. But that's the really very, very important. And also, know that when you release a book into the world, no matter what it's about, it will take on a life of its own that you can't control. I think it's really important that you stand up for your book. As you said, after Heather Has Two Mommies came out, which, by the way, I always tell people, I did not write a controversial book. I wrote a book that some people saw as controversial.
Sure.
So it just, so many things happened to that book. And, I felt if I'm not going to defend my book, and by extension, the rights of LGBTQ families, who is? Right. So, be prepared to put yourself out there to defend your book, and you will have help. You will find
Mhm.
allies, I guarantee, including
Mhm.
me. Call me. I will help you through it.
That's great. That's great. So you just said you didn't write Heather Has Two Mommies to be controversial, which I totally get. You were, uh, I'm guessing, wanting to portray a family that was not portrayed at the time in children's literature. Um, pretty much at all back then. I assume I want to ask sort of what was your sort of motivation or your inspiration for writing Heather Has Two Mommies?
This is a story I have told many times, so I have it down to a concise version. Yeah.
Okay.
So I was literally walking down the street, Northampton, Mass, where I lived at the time. Now I live outside of Northampton, and somebody stopped me and said, "I don't have a book that I could read to my daughter that shows a family like ours. Somebody should write one." And I knew by somebody she meant me. I had never actually written a children's book before, but I had written several books for adults. And I think I was probably the only writer that she knew personally, or the only lesbian writer that she knew personally, perhaps.
Mhm.
So I said, yes, I will do that. And the
Small
reason,
house.
the reason that I took her request to heart is because I know what her child was going through. I grew up in the 1950s in a Jewish household, in a Jewish family, and I never read a book that showed a family like mine. And so even though I was surrounded by families that were pretty much like mine in Brooklyn, um, I asked my parents questions like, why can't we have a Christmas tree? Why can't I look for Easter eggs? And, my parents would say that those aren't our holidays, very respectfully, but, you go very quickly from, I can't do what everybody else is doing, to there's something wrong with us.
Right.
Right. And I remember very distinctly the first time I saw a Jewish children's book. I was 27 years old, and it was in Northampton. It was at a store called an independent bookstore that no longer exists, called Beyond Words. It was called The Carp in the Bathtub. And I just stood there and read the whole thing, and tears streamed down my face. I felt so recognized and validated. And I just thought, my God, if this is how I feel, how does a child feel?
Yeah.
And, a child probably can't articulate, I wish I could see myself reflected in a book, right? But, and do something about that. Though kids now are much more sophisticated than they were when I was growing up. But anyway, I knew that I could do something about it. And, once somebody asked me to do something like that, I can't turn my back on that. So I, and of course, incorrectly, I thought, well, how hard can it be? It's only a picture book. There's not even very many words. So, which I knew was, a fallacy. And I should have known better than that, because I'm a poet and people think the same about poetry, right? It's so short. How hard can it be? It's, I'll give you a quote. One of my favorite quotes is from Mark Twain, who heard from an editor. An editor said to Mark Twain, I need 3 pages. And he wrote back, need 100 pages, give me 3 days. Need 3 pages, give me 100 days. So there you have it.
Exactly.
So anyway, so I wrote the book. I approached every publisher I knew. Nobody wanted to do it. And then a friend who was a lesbian mom of a 1-year-old daughter at the time, and I got together and we just decided we're going to do this ourselves. So there was no Kickstarter back then. So I wrote letters, and we asked for $10 donations. We got $4,000, all in $10 donations, basically. And then I kicked in a little bit more of my money, and everyone who donated to us received a book within a year. And then some, back then there were many more feminist bookstores than there are now. So they started carrying the book. And then Sasha Allison saw the book in New Words in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And he had just published Daddy's Roommate. So he said, who are you? Why don't we get together? And I'm like, I don't really want to be a co-publisher. I want to get back to writing. So if you'd like to be the publisher, be my guest. And then that's what happened.
Great.
I know that's a very long-winded answer.
No, it's wonderful. And it's wonderful that back before self-publishing or desktop publishing was easy, as well, I mean, it's never easy, but it's much easier now than it used to be to bring a book out on your own. You did it, and it's still in print. I mean, obviously it's been taken up by publishers since then, but it became very successful. And that's great for a lot of people to hear who are considering doing that with their own books. So since this time, you've written several books that center around the LGBTQ characters and lesbian and gay families. And one of them that I particularly love is right behind your head there, Sparkle Boy. I love that book. And I'm just going to give a little synopsis for people who haven't read it. It's about this boy, Casey, who is just, what I love about him is he's just so sure of who he is. And he wants to dress in sparkly girl clothes like his sister does, and jewelry like his grandmother does, and wear sparkly nail polish. And his parents and his grandmother are fine with it. But his sister, Jessie, is a little uncomfortable with this. And I think that was just so interesting in your book. And when I first read the book, I thought this was very sneaky because Lesléa flipped the expected reactions of the characters. And I thought, you were doing it for the adults who are going to be reading this book out loud to their kids. And I'm sure you weren't that calculating when you were writing it, but that's what I thought. I thought, as an adult reading it out loud to a child, I would expect the sister to be okay with it, and maybe the parents or the grandmother to be uncomfortable with it. And I was surprised. And I loved that about the book, that it surprised me. What has the response been to this book? I imagine overwhelmingly great, I would assume, but what have you heard from readers?
Well, I've heard from so many parents who are so grateful for the book because they have a sparkle boy at home who has never seen himself in a book. I have heard from a lot of gay men who are like, with tears in their eyes, saying, if only I had a book like this when I was growing up. And, that means so much to me. Some kids, they're not even concerned with the fact that Casey wants to wear sparkly things. They think really it's the most interesting thing is that it's this rivalry between siblings, which I think is also pretty cool.
Yes.
I really wanted Casey to be surrounded by accepting adults. That was really important to me because you don't see that much. Like you said, it's usually the adults that are having the problem. And Jessie, it's very clear that the reason she has a problem with this is because of what she's heard.
Right.
She lives in this world like we all do, where there are a lot of gender expectations, stereotypical gender expectations. Luckily that is changing, but it's still, that is the prevalent message for a lot of the time. And she also doesn't want her little brother wearing these things because they're hers.
Right. Yes.
So and she wants, but at the end, and I love this, at the end, some other kids, start giving Casey a hard time in the library, and she, of course, rises to the occasion and defends her brother and realizes, of course, how much she loves him and how special she is. But at the very end of the book, the two siblings are on the floor. One of them is coloring, and one of them is making a crown. One of them is making a beaded necklace, and then the very last spread, they gift them to each other.
Yes.
And I just thought, and that was actually the illustrator's idea. I love, and we can talk about that if there's time, about how illustrators add so much to the book of visual storytelling. But that's really the message of the book, that their love for each other. And it took me years and years to write that book because I couldn't figure out the answers to Casey's question, because every time he's told, you can't wear sparkly nail polish, you can't wear a sparkly skirt, he would say, why? And there's really no answer, right?
Yeah.
And then the answer is because that's the way it's done, or that's the way it's always been. And then his sister says, not anymore. So it took me a long, because I kept thinking that I had to come up with like this answer. And then I realized, there's really no answer to his question.
Because there's no good reason why.
Exactly.
Yeah. when you see it that way, you go, well, why not?
Exactly.
Yeah. But see, I love that about so many of your books. There are layers to the story, and depending on who you are or what you bring to the book as a reader, you're going to get something different from it. And so I understand, Jessie, I had two younger brothers and I didn't want them touching my stuff either. So I totally get that. And I sympathized with her on that level. I also was really happy to see her stand up for Casey. Her love for her brother overrode her embarrassment, discomfort, whatever it was. which is awesome. And so, and those are themes that you can take, anybody can take away from a book like that. So that's what I love about so many of your books, have so many of those layers. So let's move on and talk about some of your other stuff. So your forthcoming picture book, Alicia and the Hurricane, which is right, I think I said, yes, right
Right
behind
there.
you, is bilingual. It's a bilingual book.
Mhm.
And so that's sort of a departure for you. How did this come about? It feels just, I obviously haven't read it because it hasn't come out yet, but just from reading what the book is about, it feels like a little bit of a departure for you. So tell us about this book.
So I'm so excited about this book. The illustrator did such a stupendous job. So the book is about a little girl named Alicia, and she lives in Puerto Rico. And the book takes place during Hurricane Maria. My spouse is Puerto Rican, and so we have been to Puerto Rico many times. And you know, when we were up here in Massachusetts reading about the horrible devastation of Hurricane Maria, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. I could just see her as a little girl, and she said, in this little voice, "What about the coquis?" So the
Oh,
coquis are these tiny little tree frogs. They're native to Puerto Rico, and they sing all night long. The males are the ones who sing, and you just they're so important to Puerto Rican culture. You know what a Puerto Rican will say is, "I'm as Puerto Rican as a coquí." So you know it's really really important. And so I decided that I would write her a book about coquí. And she's actually adopted, and her name was changed, but her birth name is Alicia. So that's kind of a nice little inside story about the book. So the book is all about sound. So it's all about hearing the coquis. And then when the family, Alicia and her family, have to go into the shelter, what does she hear? She hears thunder and lightning. She hears somebody playing a guitar, but she doesn't hear the coquis. And then when she comes out of the shelter and goes home, what does she hear? Complete silence. And she's very worried about the coquis. And then that night, what does she hear? She hears a generator. She hears grown-ups talking. And then very, very faintly, she starts to hear the song of the coquis coming back, which gives her hope. So
that's
that is, you know, a summary of the book. And I thought it was really important, first of all, to have a Puerto Rican illustrator, which I do. Elizabeth Baez is this incredible artist, and to have the book be bilingual. So I'm really really happy about it, and I can't wait for it to come out and start publicizing it.
That's awesome.
And you
So
know,
that's,
and I wrote the book for children to be comforted, and not only the Puerto Rican children who went through Hurricane Maria, but you know, any child that's been through a natural disaster and has had their life upended.
yeah. And oh, I was going to say something. Oh, so that comes out in April, right? This
Correct.
April. Okay, so we'll definitely keep an eye out for that. That sounds great.
And I
So,
just
and
have to
then,
say one other thing, which is that Lee and Lowe put together just an unbelievably spectacular study guide. So if there are any teachers listening, it's on the Lee and Lowe website. It's so comprehensive. I was just blown away by it.
great. That's awesome. And you know, the book, your most recently published book that has already come out is As Babies Dream, which is also right behind your shoulder there. And this also has some themes of the natural world and you know, sort of comfort and families and how we're all connected. And it seems that that comes up in your books a lot. Are these themes important to you? You know, obviously animals, dogs and cats in particular, show
Yeah.
up in your books a lot. And but this connection with nature and just sort of each other, it feels like this sort of how we're all sort of responsible for taking care of each other seems to come up a lot in your books. Is that something you think about a lot when you're writing, or is it just sort of come out?
Well, you know, my writing process is more intuitive. Like I kind of wait for, as my friend Patty McLaughlin says, I wait for a story to tap me on the shoulder. So it's not like you know, it comes from my brain so much as that it comes from inside of me. But then when I start working, of course, I think about all that. And community is very, very important to me. Ever since I was growing up, it's funny, my parents always said, you know, trust your family, nobody else. But they didn't live that way because we had chosen family. And I had this wonderful group of aunts and uncles who were not blood relatives around me, who I still have my one beloved Aunt Phyllis, who Gittle's journey is about. So, community has always gotten me through, and I just think it's important to be a part of your neighborhood, your city, your state, your nation. I mean, community just gets bigger
Sure.
and bigger and bigger, and it includes the natural world, of course. And we are responsible for the natural world. We've kind of made a mess of it. And hopefully, we will try and repair some of the damage that we've done. But speaking of repairing the damage, I just want to say that in Judaism, there is a concept called tikkun olam, which in Hebrew translates to repairing the world. And every Jew at birth is given that assignment to repair the world. And it's understood that you cannot do that alone. And it's understood that that probably will not happen in your lifetime, but that does not let you off the hook. And so and everyone has to decide for themselves how they're going to contribute to this concept of tikkun olam. And the way I contribute, my self-assignment, is to write children's books that hopefully make children feel better about themselves, or feel good about themselves, feel like they have a place, feel like they understand the world better, and feel inspired to do something to make the world a safe place for all of us.
I love that. I love that. Another thing that I really admire about your books, when you're writing, Judaism is a very important theme for you in a lot of your books as well. But the stories that you tell, which might be historical, might have to do with specific traditions of the religion, you still find these universal details and moments that allow any reader to read the book and connect on an emotional level. And you talked about Gittle's journey, which I would love you to tell us the story behind that book. And then I want to show one excerpt from it on a slide, because there's details that you just made it. This particular spread just tugged at my heart when I read it. But tell us the story about this book first. This is very
so first
personal.
of all, it's too tall to fit on my bookshelf, so I'm just going to show you the cover so you can see it.
Yes.
So Gittle's journey is based on a story that I've known all my life. My beloved Aunt Phyllis, who is my godmother, one of the chosen family members, she's 93, and her mother came over here when she was about 10 by herself to escape pogroms and hopefully have a better life. And so she was supposed to travel with an adult, but the adult was turned away because of an eye infection, which was the most common reason that people were not allowed on board the ships that were coming over from Europe back then, because it was very contagious. So this little 10-year-old girl was sent by herself in steerage, and all she had was a piece of paper in her hand that had the name and address of a relative. And she was told, hold this piece of paper very tightly, don't lose it. And when you get to America, show it to an officer. When she got this, and this is the true part of the story. So when she got to America, she showed the piece of paper, and she had held it so tightly that all the ink had worn off on her hand and it was illegible. And so they put her picture in the Jewish newspaper, and her relatives saw it and came to Ellis Island and fetched her. And so that's an anecdote, true story. And so I had to work really hard to flesh it out and make it into an entire picture book. Right. And I'll just say that if you go on my website, I made a short, very short 15-minute documentary in which I interview my aunt. And if you go on my website, you'll see 2 clips of her, and she is absolutely charming. So I recommend, if you're interested in the subject of immigration, that you check that out, because she is just wonderful.
Oh, great. So that brings up, basing a book on a true story, like you said, it was an anecdote that you started with, but you had to create a whole plot around it. And we actually touched on this subject on my last Kidlit Social with my guest, Alda Dobbs, who wrote a middle grade novel based on her grandmother's immigration story from Mexico. But at some point you have to think in terms of the story, over the truth. So did you have any trouble elaborating, creating new characters, fleshing out the story at all to make it good fiction?
So what I am always after is the emotional truth of any story.
Mhm.
So like right at the beginning of the story, you have Giddel saying goodbye to her best friend, Reza. So I started by thinking, well, a 10-year-old girl, usually, 10-year-old girls have best friends or close friends. So I started there, and that's very universal, right? And because I love animals, she had to say goodbye to her goat. So then I had to do a lot of research. Also, I had a lot of questions like, what did they eat? What kind of beds do they sleep in? How long was the journey? All that kind of things. And then I learned a lot because, often when I have a question, I go to the research. The research gives me information that I didn't even know I was looking for, perhaps, but it goes into the book. For example, I learned that there were, I knew that a lot of children traveled by themselves. What I didn't know was that a lot of families on the ships took these children in for the journey, and they were like these makeshift families. And I loved that. And
Yes.
so I have Giddel playing cards with a group of boys, and there was also people brought instruments and played music. And so it was pretty terrible. I mean, my aunt told me her mother was like seasick the entire time. But there were also some moments of joy, and that was really important for me to show.
Yes, I want to show one spread from inside the book. As I was reading it, this one just tugged, so much of it tugged at my heart, but this one in particular, I just want to go to the next page. So I'm just going to read this. This is on the ship. Giddel's mother had to stay behind because of her eye infection. Giddel's on the ship, and her mother had given her the Shabbat candlesticks to take with her. And so this spread says, Giddel spent many lonely hours sitting on her berth, talking to Basha, which is the doll she has. I miss Reza, she said to the little rag doll. I miss Frida. I miss Mama, Giddel wailed. When Shabbos arrived, Giddel cried an ocean of tears. She had Mama's candlesticks, but no candles. Mama had candles, but no candlesticks. Candles and candlesticks belong together, just as she and Mama belong together. Giddel shut her eyes and sang the Sabbath blessing softly to herself. It only made her sadder. I mean, this just encapsulates the torture and the pain of having to leave your family behind, regardless of how old you are, and how important it was to go to a new country, to start a new life, that this pain was considered, worth it for these families. But I really see your training here as a poet, because, and in a lot of your books, I see where you pick out these very small, specific details that have this great emotional payoff, and you just sort of put them on the page, and then the reader just takes them in and creates an entire relationship from these small details. And I think that is just so wonderful. I see that in your books all the time, and I just love that you do that. So
well, thank you. I just want to say that the candlesticks really frame the story, because in the second spread, Giddel and her mother are lighting the Shabbos candles in Europe. And then you have them on the ship and they're separated. And then at the end of the book, spoiler alert, her mother does come. And the last spread is that Giddel takes her mother by the hand and says, let's go home. The sun is setting and it's almost time to light the candles for Shabbos.
Yes. And that's wonderful. So it's like a motif or symbol that goes throughout the book, which does hold everything together very nicely. So,
and also, wait, I'm going to say one more thing. Sorry. Sure. And there's a lengthy author's note in the back with an actual photo of the candlesticks that my grandmother brought over from Europe and gave to me when she was 99, right before she died.
Oh, wonderful. Yes. So the story is very personal on a lot of levels for you.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yes. Now this text is a lot longer than a typical picture book. Did you have any pushback from the editor on that, or did it just need to be this long to tell this? It's a pretty substantial story that you're telling.
So this was my biggest fear, that my editor was going to say, you need to make this into a chapter book or a novel. And I was so grateful that he did not. My brilliant editor, Howard Reeves at Abrams, really loved this story. And I can't remember if it's 40 or 48 pages. It's not 32 pages, I know that. But he had this vision, and the illustrator, Amy June Bates, my God, she did the most amazing job with original woodcuts, different borders around every single illustration. I mean, it's incredible. So yeah, I thought that might happen, but I'm really happy that it didn't.
Yeah. No, I think it does not feel too long when you read it, because there are just so many aspects of this journey that need to be told. I can't imagine cutting any part of the book out. It feels very complete. So let's talk a little bit about your board books, which are also some of your more recent books. I see them up there high on the shelf there, the ABC Cats and 1, 2, 3 Cats. Completely different from a lot of other stuff we've talked about here, but of course, cats, and they're in rhyme, and you have some other books in rhyme as well. So I have a couple questions about sort of the board book. First of all, let's talk about rhyme in general. When you're writing in rhyme, that's meant to be read out loud to a child as a board book or a picture book, are you very, very conscious of things like the meter, and do you have to have perfect rhyme at the end of the lines and that sort of thing? Or do you not really worry about that? I mean, you've written so much poetry. Does it just sort of come out of you, or do you have to really think about it?
Oh my God, it's so hard. It is so hard. And I'm not saying that to discourage people, but yes, I worry, I fret, I pester my poems, things go through 20, 30, sometimes more, so many drafts. Yes to perfect rhyme. Yes to perfect meter. Yes to perfect scanning. I'm absolutely a tyrant when it comes to writing in rhyme. I think it's so important for the lines to really sing. So I read them out loud constantly.
Yes.
And more importantly, and here's a tip for anyone who wants to write in verse, have somebody else read it out loud to you. Yes. Because you know how you want it to sound. So you're going to make it fit in the way you want to hear it. But somebody else coming to it cold is going to actually read it the way it appears on the page. And if they stumble, or if the rhythm is off, you will hear it. And
yes.
then you need to change it.
And then we have, board books and these are concept books. They teach the alphabet, numbers. Editors are always saying, to sell a concept book, you have to do it. You have to have something different. So I'm going to show a couple pages here from the inside, because I just love the illustrations on these. They are just amazing and wonderful. And I know I have a lot of cat lovers who watch The Social. So here's just a couple spreads from Isabella Kung, the illustrator. Kung, sorry. Yes, I have a misprint on my notes here. But they're just charming, the illustrations. They look, you just want to hug these cats. Were the cats enough to kind of put it over the top, and for editors to say, this is interesting, this frames it in a slightly unique way? Or, I guess what I'm asking is, how hard a sell was this for someone else who wants to write concept books like this?
Okay, so here is the inside scoop about these two books.
Okay.
Originally, I've been writing so many picture books. I thought, I really want to write something a little longer. So what I wrote was a collection of cat poems. There were about 15 poems. And my editor decided to take these two poems out. There was like an alphabet poem, a numbers poem, a colors poem, a days of the week poem, months of the year poem, etc. And she decided to take these two poems out and make them into two separate board books. So it broke my heart a tiny bit, because I was really into having this whole collection. But then, I just thought, do you want to have a whole collection sitting in your drawer, or do you want to have these 2 board books on the shelf? And so I said yes, and I'm so glad I did, because you can see the artwork is so beautiful. Isabella Kung, she lives in San Francisco, and she describes herself as an artist and a cat wrangler. So she is all about cats, and you can tell from the
Yes.
illustration she knows cats so well, and it's just so charming. So I'm very happy. But every book, not every book, but many books start out as one thing and wind up as something else. So Quetzal the Cat Who Composed also was a chapter book. It was 35 pages. And my editor said, I love this, but I really think it's a picture book. So it went from 35 pages to 5 pages of text, which also was a little heartbreaking. But, I think my editor was right. And it came, again, it was Amy June Bates, the same illustrator who did Gittle's Journey. And I think it came out beautifully. So listen to your editors.
They do kind of know what they're doing a lot of the time. Yes.
Yeah. If you're lucky.
Well,
to have such great editors.
I'm just hoping, I know someone who's going to have a baby at some point soon, because I want to buy those 2 books for a baby shower present. I just love them. Okay, so we're going to get to Q&A here in a second. And if any of you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box there, not in the chat box, because I won't find them. But I wanted to ask you one final question. Do you have any parting advice for people who want to write books that they feel really passionately about and put out into the world? You've already said, have your support system, which I think is really, really important. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
So my advice to pre-published writers, or even writers who are published, read as much as possible, write as much as possible, believe in yourself, don't give up, and surround yourself with supportive people, which I've already said. And here's my favorite statistic in the entire world. 100% of people who have published books at one time in their life had never published a book.
Yes.
Okay. So you're starting where everybody starts.
Good point. Yes. And we forget that quite often, but thank you for reminding us of that. All right. Well, I'm going to get to a few questions here before we let you go. This is from Sheila, who says, by the way, I knew Quetzal the real cat, and she loves your book. So exciting. That's very exciting. She asks, how do you produce such a prolific and impressive body of work? For instance, for nonfiction, you need time to research or travel, etc. Do you have any tips on being so prolific? And are you like really organized? Do you never watch TV? I mean, there's got to be something that you do that the rest of us aren't doing.
I watch Jeopardy every night. So yes, I do watch TV. But so here's the thing. This is advice that goes contrary to what everybody says, and I can't take responsibility if you follow this advice. But my advice is to quit your day job. If you have to, if your writing has to support you, you're going to find a way to make that happen. So I took the example of Barbara Streisand, who never learned how to type. She said, if I have a fallback plan, I'm going to fall back on it. So she never learned how to type because she figured if she learned how to type, she was going to be a typist. So I never wanted to do anything else but be a writer. I set up my life so that that's what I would do. And if it wasn't working, it was my job to figure out a way that it would work. So for example, I had a lot of chutzpah really, because I taught writing workshops, women's writing workshops in my home for many years after I only had one book published, my first novel, which was called Good Enough to Eat for Adults. But, I just really set up my life so that that's what I do all day. I write, or I research, or I do what I call POBIZ, Poe standing for poetry, not Edgar Allan Poe. I answer emails, I set up speaking engagements, I do whatever it takes. But I think of myself as a writer first. And actually I do have a day job. My day job is being an author. And so my whole life revolves around creating literature and supporting the literature that I create and supporting other people's literature as well.
That's wonderful. And yeah, that's actually a really great advice, because you have way more to lose if you don't make it as an author if that's all you're doing. So it is motivation to make it work. Like you said, there's
Yeah.
nothing, you're not falling back on something, and you can't give yourself that excuse of, well, I have a day job, so I can only work an hour a week on my writing or whatever it is. Yeah.
So, but I do want to qualify that by saying that, I have certain privileges, right? I'm a
Yes.
white person. I've been married for 32 years, and I got health insurance through my spouse's job all that time.
Yes.
So that
Yes.
makes a huge difference. So I do
Yes.
realize that, while I'm giving that advice, that there are certain caveats and conditions that people have to, I don't have children. So there are things that one must take into consideration, of course.
True. Very true. Very true. Okay. Let's see. This is Gabby. It's a long question. I'm just going to read it. I haven't read the whole thing, but I'm just going to read it here. I'm working on a nonfiction book that is meant to be inclusive and descriptive of the experience of all kinds of families. I'm finding it strangely difficult with whether to put it in first, second, or third person language-wise, and how to make it work for readers with two dads, two moms, mom and dad, single parents, etc., without having to actually list each variation. Just wondering if you've seen an elegant solution to either of those challenges, or any books you'd recommend that do that so well. So I guess we're talking really about how to refer to families that could be any sort of construction of family. We don't really have like an inclusive, it's like pronouns, we're struggling with pronouns right now. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's a little hard to answer that question without seeing the manuscript, without
Sure.
really knowing a lot more about the project. But I do think pronouns are so important now, and we all are trying to figure them out. I would definitely look for sensitivity readers,
Mm,
to ask people from those communities to help you.
right, right. No, I think that's a great idea. Just sort of do your best with the manuscript and then ask the sensitivity
Right,
readers for
right. I
advice.
had no less than 6 sensitivity readers for Alicia and the hurricane.
Mm, yeah,
And I'm really glad I did. Each one of them gave me something that I used in the book.
that's great. Do you have
Yeah.
any tips on how to find good sensitivity readers? Do you just sort of
Yeah.
reach out through your network of other writers and
Yeah, that's a really good question. I have been very lucky. Like when I wrote the book Hachiko Waits, I was lucky enough to find which is a true story that takes place in Japan in the 1920s and 30s. And I have never been to Japan. And obviously I could not go to Japan at that time, even if I could go to Japan. But anyway, so I was lucky enough to find a research librarian who was Japanese and grew up in Japan during that time. And she was fantastic. So sometimes it's luck. But I would start if you live near a university, go to, I could have gone to the Japanese department. Your local library, your reference librarian might be able to help you. That's where I got my connection. I mean, I don't know if there are people who advertise, but I know there are people out there. I mean, maybe your publisher knows some people, or again, if you are an active member of your writing community, I hope everyone here is a member of SCBWI, Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. You could put the word out through that network and they can help
exactly.
you. So there's all kinds of ways.
Yeah. And I've seen people on the Kidlit 411 Facebook group, which you can ask to join. It's a huge community of children's writers. People asking that question. I need a sensitivity reader for this. Do you have recommendations? And people will post recommendations. So I think
the other thing I guess I would say is, it's a really important question to ask yourself, why am I writing the story that I am writing? And hopefully you do have some connection to the community or the culture that you're writing about, right? Or otherwise, why are you doing it? So, for example, besides being married to someone who's Puerto Rican, I certainly used my spouse as a sensitivity reader, but also I felt like it was important to widen that a little bit. So, I have this important and deep connection to that community. So it was relatively easy for me to find people.
Mhm. Great, great. And I did have a question there about how you handled the bilingual aspect. I assume that there was a translator, right? That the
Correct.
publisher
Yes.
hired.
I believe she's
Okay.
on the, oh, she's not,
I-
no, she's not on the cover, but she's inside. She gets credit.
And I looked on the publisher's website. I saw that she's listed there too in the listing for the book. I know I saw her name somewhere, so that's great. Okay. So yes, as the writer, you don't have to worry about taking care of the translation.
No, no,
If you're
my
writing
publisher
a
did that.
bilingual book. Yes.
But I
Yes.
actually decided that I wanted to show that the Spanish translation to some Spanish speaking people to get their advice. And actually somebody found a typo on the very first page in the first sentence. I was like, oh my God. So I was really
Oh,
happy that I did that. There can never be
yes,
too many pairs of eyes on a manuscript.
that's very true. Very true.
Mortified,
Um,
really.
I have a question here about poetry and writing in rhyme. This person says, I've read lots of books being published that do not have the perfect meter, scansion, etc. that you mentioned. So why do you think they are still getting sold? Well, first of all, at least my take on this is depending on the reader that you're going for. Some books written in rhyme are really for slightly older readers, older end of the picture book audience, and perhaps that doesn't have to have quite as perfect a meter as the younger. At least that's the way books used to be. I think maybe they're getting pickier about the meter these days with picture books. But what do you say to that? Books that are out there already might not have that perfect rhyme and meter.
I think this is a much broader question because I think we've all had the experience where we pick up a book and we think, oh my God, this is terrible. How did this ever get published? And we
Yes.
know either our own manuscripts, which of course we think are brilliant, or manuscripts of other writers that we know are like, this is so good. Why can't this person find a publisher? So, it's up to it's actually not only up to the editor anymore, it's up to the editor, the sales people, sometimes Barnes and Noble representatives, all kinds of people, the advertising people, the marketing people, they all weigh in on these decisions. So, if I had a way to look into their heads and figure out what they want, I'd be selling everything I write, which I don't. So I don't know the answer to that question, but I personally I'm a stickler for perfect rhyme and meter.
Right.
It's just, and if you work with me, because I take on a lot of private students, you will know that I will keep sending it back to you and saying this line doesn't scan. So
Well, there you go.
yeah.
And poetry is so hard because you can have it perfect in your head, but someone will just stress a slightly different syllable when they're reading it out loud because of an accent, because they grew up in a different region of the country, because whatever. And suddenly they say, oh, the meter's off or it doesn't scan. And it's almost subjective in a way, a lot of poetry, I think, as far as the scansion and the meter go, but you can only do your best. Okay. We're about done here. I do have someone asked about, can you mention again who was your editor for Gittel, and do you know if he still works at Abrams?
My editor is Howard Reeves. He does still work at Abrams. Please do not contact him and say Lesléa Newman's,
No.
advised me to contact you. Please don't do that, because that's just not cool.
No. And
yeah.
I believe that Abrams is only taking submissions through agents right now. Anyway,
I think that's probably true. Yeah.
Yes.
But can I just say one more thing about poetry, since we've been talking so much
Absolutely.
about poetry? Somebody in the chat very kindly talked about my book, I Carry My Mother, which is, so I'm just going to do I have a captive audience. I can't help myself because my adult poetry is really the work of my heart. So
Absolutely.
This is my book, I Carry My Mother. It's actually a memoir in verse. And it's a lot of rhymed poetry, which we've been talking about. So it's about the last years of my mom's life and how I took care of her. And it's actually part 1, and this is part 2. This is I Wish My Father, which is about the last years of my dad's life. My mom died first. And this book is not in rhymed poetry at all. It's in unrhymed narrative verse. So it's kind of interesting, that my parents were very different people. I love that they're now a box set. And the poetry is very different. So thank you for indulging me. Usually
Sure.
those books are here, but I
Yes.
wanted to put my children's books up today because of talking to
Excellent.
children's book writers.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I have been wanting to read those two books. I saw what they were about, and I think I read an excerpt or one poem from one of them, and maybe you have it up on your website or somewhere. And I thought I have to get those books and read them. So I'm really glad that you showed us those. Thank you.
Well,
Okay,
I was so
well,
shocked that somebody in the chat had actually read I Carry My Mother, because, you know, the adult poetry world is so different in
It
terms of
is.
sales and getting your work out there. So I'm always thrilled when someone has actually read these books, and especially
Yeah.
when they say kind things about it. So thank you for that.
Oh, good, good. Well, we are at the top of the hour, and I don't want to keep you any longer, but thank you so much for being here, Lesléa. It's been a wonderful conversation. Everyone, please go to lesleanewman.com, and I believe let me put the slides back up. I have the link directly to your kids' books as well. LesléaKids.com to see all her children's books. Thank you so much. This has just been a terrific conversation. I appreciate your time here tonight.
Thank you so much. You were so prepared and asked such great questions, and that's really all an author could ask for.
Well, it's been a delight. So, and thank you all for being here with us tonight. And we will see you in 2 weeks on the next Kidlit Social. So you all have a good evening. Good night.